So moving right along, like I said, I guess the narrative will have to start here. My family came from Europe and from Mexico in the 1800s. They came to Simon Gonzalez came to Otay, which is right there in South Bay, San Diego, and they're credited the Gonzalez family with being one of the originals there. And then the Heist family came from Europe in the 1800s. Um, Eddie and Freddie Heist, those are known stuntmen, and their children became stunt folks. But we were never really acclimated to that side of the family because something happened and it cast a divide. So the family left LA and went to San Diego. It was a national city. And then over the years, my grandfather made the decision to bring the family from San Diego to Napa to give them more opportunities and less problems. So the men would work at Mare Island Naval Shipyard, and my mother and my grandmother worked at Napa State Hospital. My mother did the psychiatric technician program, and it was at that point I was 4 years old when we got to Napa. So that's when the abuse that I can remember when it started. Um, and that was the first time that Child Protective Services got involved. I was at Phillips Elementary School, and they gave me back to my mother. The issue was my grandfather. And the irony for me is that these people that give permission for people to abuse their children based on the abuse that they were subjected to, or they'll label it as hard love or discipline and everything. And I'm sure those are important, but there's a line that can't be crossed. Like my grandfather lighting his son's hands on fire with lighter fluid, that would definitely crosses a line to try to teach him not to mess with fire. There's other ways. And he got in trouble for that. I'm pretty sure he was arrested. But the fact that my grandmother stood by all that and didn't do anything, I think she felt guilty for it later on in life because my Uncle Ray went through so many problems. He delved into substance abuse, and he's just on a he always had a roller coaster despite the high level of intelligence and all the capability he had. Man, he is so smart. Like, this guy can build a computer from scratch. He went to school up at College of the Redwoods. um, really hyper intelligent, but it's just squandered by the struggles that he has to endure. And they would label it with certain psychological imposition, but it was the abuse. It was the abuse that they suffered as a child that when he got to a certain point, addiction was the next step. And both of those combined just put his life on these constant roller coasters. And my grandfather, my stepfather, and my mother, I was able to confront them about their behavior as an adult. Um, and my grandmother turned to me and she said, "Oh yeah, when my dad broke my collarbone with a chain," and I looked at her and she was serious too, like she was justifying it by using that justification. And that's when I realized for sure that this is generational abuse kind of stuff that was handed down from way before my parents and my parents' parents. It was my parents' parents. Well, my parents' grandparents, on my mother's side, that both, I think it came from both the Heist and the Gonzalez family. That old school, you know, where you just fuck a kid up to teach him, and at the same time there was all this hard work that they did. They were hardworking people, and they had all these other um, well teachings of love and all this. But like I said, if you have a wonderful concoction made, a nice iced tea, but then you pour vinegar in it, just a little bit of vinegar, it's gonna make the drink not taste good. So I don't care if you do a whole bunch of love and all this wonderfulness, but you slip in child abuse in there, it's gonna just mess all that other stuff up. And um, you have to hope that the goodness that exists within a child will be able to overpower that little bit of ugly and make the drink taste later on, taste good again later on in their life. But so the cycle of abuse continued, and then my mother sought out this. She was looking for men, I'm thinking they reminded her of her father, and they had that heavy hand. And like I said, she married Robert O'Donnell, and then the abuse started with him. And he always blamed Vietnam and being in the shit is the justification for why he used to fuck us up. Me and my sister started running away at a really young age to go live with other people and live on the streets and, runaway shelters to try to escape this stuff. But this dude was saying that he was in Vietnam, which he was, on a boat out in the ocean. He was never in the jungle fighting with the infantry or nothing, the way he was lying and telling that story. And they left us with his mother in South Central LA for a summer, and she was beating the shit out of us. And that's why I've made the connection that he was abused, but he couldn't say that it was his mother because he loved his mother too much. And so he tried to blame it on Vietnam as a justification for carrying forward that kind of behavior. Because I remember hearing her say things, and I remember hearing him say to me as she would beat me with a switch and all that stuff. And it was just awkward because I had no blood connection to this woman. This was my stepfather's mother. So over time, and now as a parent, I understand what happened and the responsibility that sits before me to make sure that stuff does not go forward. Not from me to my son, not from my son to his children, should he end up having children, and so on and so on. When you're trying to break these cycles, you're looking to protect not just your own child, but your child's children, your grandchildren, and that's the importance of what's going on. So all that shit led to being a runaway, me going to a program called Our Family here in Napa, and then eventually living as a runaway got me picked up for having a pair of nunchakas. And I was sent to juvenile hall, not because I really committed a crime, but the police, the Napa PD, was kind of worried about me because I told them I was a runaway when they asked where I lived. And so that was their path they felt to protect me. Was like, normally we wouldn't care because you didn't hurt nobody, you weren't doing nothing, you just had them on your possession. Somebody saw you practicing with them, but they said because we're concerned that you're a runaway, so instead of calling my parents or whatever, they're like, we're just gonna lock you up and then they'll get you back home. But that set me on a whole different course right there as well, where then you're introduced to the juvenile justice system and you learn where you got to fight, even more so, because you're going to be in there with other ruffians, and you got to be what your environment is. And that eventually, like I said, I was sent to Our Family, graduated from that program, went back into foster care. But eventually I would go back down to San Diego as a teenager and then be introduced to this other set of addiction. Not substance, more substance, yes, but with substance was more lifestyle that came with that introduced you to more significant substances. But the lifestyle itself, like I was telling you, man, the parties and cruising Highland, and there was gunplay and all this stuff that most people only see in a movie or on a show or something. It's reality, and it has this euphoria that's, similar to drugs. And then you got drugs involved in it too, drinking, jungle juice, house parties, party crews, tagging crews, breakdancing, music. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. And it furthers addictions. And the city of San Diego and the lifestyle itself, I would say, is an addiction, because you can move away from it, far away, have all these opportunities, but it'll still call you back. It's a trip. People that have lived there and moved away, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You could succeed so much just by moving away, but then it's like you're always going to miss it, and you'll often scuttle opportunity to go back and hang and just do things that are detrimental to a progressive path. And then you have friends that you care about that are bogged down essentially in that quicksand of self-destructiveness, and you want to pull them out. And in doing so, you pull yourself further back in. So yeah, so there was that launched a whole path of an interesting, colorful part of the chronology that I'll go further with. That led to the California Youth Authority. Went to Gladiator School, Fred Cinella School for Boys. I was allowed to go to the LEAD program. It's a leadership, esteem, ability, and discipline, which is a boot camp style program that's ran by the California National Guard, and you do a boot camp. And it really reminded me of my desire to go into the Army. And at that time, I didn't know that you still could go into the Army because California 707B statutes can't legally convict a juvenile. It can only be a true finding by a referee. So you're still allowed to go into the military. And that's how that happened later on. After I left Youth Authority and went a few places, went to the California Conservation Corps, was a corpsman there, the Job Corps, and then a buddy of mine, he said, "Hey, I'm joining the Army, man. Let's go on the Battle Buddy program." And I told him, like, I don't think I can because of my youth. And he talked to the recruiter, and the recruiter said, "No, we can get you a waiver and yada yada." And so there I was. I got held back a little bit, but then so he went to boot camp first, even though we joined together. And then I came later on. He went to Fort Wainwright, Alaska, and I went to Germany for my first duty station. And he's a police officer now in Indio, California. And here I am telling you guys this story. But he knew my wife, and they were, like I said, it was back in days. There was party crews, tagging crews, dance crews, gangsters, Rastafarians, everybody, and everybody congregated at the same places. Wherever the party was at, everybody converged on those locations and had a good time. And as a result, there was many relationships, friendships that were built based off the party scene in San Diego in the 90s.